Somewhere beneath the surface of everything we think we know, something older is resting, not with alarm, not with noise, but with patience, with stillness, with the soft, unhurried weight of centuries pressing gently against the present. There are questions buried so deeply inside the earth and the sky and the sea that even the most careful, most devoted scholars have sat beside them for decades and simply wondered. Tonight, you do not need to solve anything. Tonight, you are only invited to drift alongside those questions, the way a leaf drifts on still water, without effort, without destination, simply carried. This is Sleepy Mysteries, a place where the unknown becomes something warm, something gentle, something that asks nothing of you except to let go. Settle in. Feel the quiet already beginning to arrive. Tonight, we explore 100 things history still cannot explain, and every single one of them is an invitation to rest a little more deeply. Let's begin. If these quiet journeys help you rest, a gentle like or subscribe helps others find their way here too. One sleepy soul at a time. But for now, we begin. There is a city that may have existed beneath warm Mediterranean waters for over 11,000 years. Plato, writing around 360 BCE in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, described a civilization called Atlantis, a place of extraordinary refinement, of long harbors and silver-lined walls and people who had somehow learned to live in remarkable harmony with the sea. He described it vanishing in a single day and night of disaster, swallowed quietly beneath the waves. Researchers and oceanographers have searched across the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, the Azores, and even Antarctica, finding patterns that stir the imagination, submerged platforms, unusual ridge formations, geological evidence of catastrophic ancient flooding. Nothing has been confirmed. Nothing has been denied. Atlantis remains a soft word, an ancient whisper, neither proven nor fully dismissed, resting somewhere between history and dream. And perhaps that is exactly where it was always meant to be found, in the quiet space between what we know and what we can only gently imagine. Long before the pyramids were built, before Stonehenge was even a sketch in any ancient mind, a place called Göbekli Tepe was already standing in the hills of what is now southeastern Turkey. Discovered in 1994 by archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, this site contains massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some of them nearly 6 meters tall, arranged in careful circular formations and carved with animals, foxes, vultures, scorpions, and cranes, with a skill and intention that still puzzles researchers deeply. The site dates back at least 12,000 years, placing it firmly in a time when humans were, according to our traditional understanding, simple hunter-gatherers without the social organization to build such things. And yet, there it is, patient, solid, waiting in the Turkish hillside. Göbekli Tepe did not just challenge the timeline of civilization. It quietly dismantled it, suggesting that something organized, something purposeful, something spiritually driven, was alive in human beings far earlier than any textbook had ever gently allowed. Perhaps your shoulders have softened a little already. Let them settle a touch further into wherever you are resting now. In the high deserts of coastal Peru, beneath a sky so dry and still that almost nothing decays, a series of enormous drawings are pressed into the earth. The Nazca lines, created by the Nazca people between roughly 500 BCE and 500 CE, stretch across approximately 500 square kilometers of pale desert floor. Among them are a hummingbird, a condor, a spider, a monkey, and a series of perfectly straight lines that extend for kilometers without deviation. The spider figure alone spans 46 meters, Most of the shapes can only be fully appreciated from the air. Scholars at the University of Yamagata in Japan have documented over 140 distinct geoglyphs, and researchers like Maria Reich devoted their entire lives to their study. Why were they made? For whom? Some theories suggest astronomical calendars, others suggest ritual pathways. None has been fully proven. The lines remain exactly as they were left, vast, quiet, unhurried, waiting beneath the Peruvian sun for a meaning that has not yet arrived in any language we speak. Somewhere in central Mexico, a city once stood that was larger than ancient Rome at its peak. Teotihuacan, whose name in the Nahuatl language means the place where the gods were created, was home to perhaps 200,000 people by the year 450 CE, making it one of the largest cities anywhere on Earth at that time. It was laid out along a precise central avenue called the Avenue of the Dead, aligned with careful astronomical intention, and graced with two enormous pyramids, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, each built with extraordinary mathematical accuracy. And then, around 550 CE, it was abandoned. No conquering army has been definitively identified. No plague has been confirmed. The people simply left. Archaeologist Linda Manzanilla has suggested internal unrest and resource collapse, and evidence of fire damage has been found in elite residences. But the full story has never been recovered. Teotihuacan remains standing, wide open to the Mexican sky, holding its silence the way only very ancient things know how to do. There is a place in the waters of the Pacific Ocean, among the remote Caroline Islands of Micronesia, where an entire city was built on an artificial island, or rather, on nearly 100 artificial islands made of interlocking basalt boulders, each one weighing as much as 50 tons. This is Nan Madol, and it was built by the Saudeleur dynasty beginning perhaps around 1200 CE, though some archaeologists believe the site may be far older. Over 92 islets are connected by a series of canals, giving rise to comparisons with Venice. The basalt used in construction came from quarries on the far side of the island of Pohnpei, transported across open sea by methods that no one has yet been able to fully demonstrate or replicate. Archaeologist Mark McCoy has worked extensively at the site, and even with modern tools and understanding, the logistics remain softly impossible. Nan Madol was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2016 and has been listed as a site in danger, drifting now, slowly, back into the embrace of the ocean that once watched it rise. In the Sichuan province of southwestern China, in the year 1986, workers excavating a brick factory stumbled upon something that rewrote the history of an entire region. They found two sacrificial pits filled with thousands of bronze objects, unlike anything known from Chinese civilization of that era. Extraordinary bronze masks with enormous eyes that protrude dramatically from the face. A bronze tree nearly 4 meters tall. Ivory tusks, jade pieces, and gold artifacts of remarkable refinement. This was Sanxingdui, a culture that flourished around 1200 to 1000 BCE, and yet shares almost no stylistic overlap with the Yellow River civilizations, considered the foundation of Chinese history. No written records from Sanxingdui have ever been found. The bronze faces suggest a people with a completely distinct vision of the divine, wide, seeing eyes turned toward something we cannot name. A third pit was excavated beginning in 2020, continuing to yield extraordinary finds. And still, who these people truly were, where they came from, and where they went, remains one of archaeology's most quietly breathtaking open questions. Notice the heaviness behind your eyes. Let your breath move slowly, the way it does when the body begins to remember there is nowhere it needs to be tonight. There is a circle of stone standing on a plain in southern England that has endured for more than 4,000 years, and it still has not fully explained itself. Stonehenge, located on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, was constructed in several phases beginning around 3000 BCE and continuing until approximately 1500 BCE. The famous sarsen stones, some standing over 8 meters tall and weighing as much as 25 tons, were transported from Marlborough Downs, roughly 25 kilometers to the north. The smaller blue stones, weighing between 2 and 5 tons each, came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a journey of over 250 kilometers. Archaeologist Mike Parker Pearson, who has led extensive research at the site, believes Stonehenge functioned as a place of ancestral veneration and seasonal ceremony. The structure aligns precisely with the midsummer sunrise and the midwinter sunset. But the full reason for its construction, the social system that organized it, and the precise meaning of its arrangement remain gently, patiently unresolved, a ring of ancient patience standing quiet in the English rain. Somewhere in the countryside of Brittany in northwestern France, nearly 3,000 standing stones stretch across the landscape in long, careful rows that seem to march softly toward the horizon. These are the Karnak stones, erected between roughly 4,500 and 2000 BCE by a Neolithic people whose name we do not know, and whose language has left no record anywhere we have yet looked. The stones are arranged in at least 11 alignments extending for over 4 kilometers, with individual stones ranging from less than a meter in height to nearly 4 meters tall. Astronomer Alexander Thom studied the alignments extensively in the 1970s and suggested that they encoded sophisticated astronomical observations. Others have proposed that they marked sacred procession routes, or that they served as territorial markers for communities whose lives were organized around seasonal migrations. No interpretation has been confirmed. The people who arranged these stones into such careful, patient lines did so with an intention so clear to them, and so softly closed to us, that walking among them today is said to feel less like archaeology and more like standing at the edge of a half-remembered dream. Notice the weight of your body wherever you are resting now. Let your jaw soften. Let your chest be still and easy, rising gently with each quiet breath. High in the mountains above Cusco in Peru, at an altitude of nearly 3,500 meters, a fortress wall was built from enormous limestone and andesite blocks fitted together with a precision that continues to confound modern engineers. This is Sacsayhuaman, constructed by the Inca people beginning around 1438 CE under the reign of Pachacuti. Some of the individual stones weigh more than 125 tons, and they were transported from quarries 8 or more kilometers away across mountain terrain, without wheels, without iron tools, without any mechanism modern researchers have been able to fully replicate. The stones are cut with irregular, multi-angled faces, some with as many as 12 sides, and yet they fit together so precisely that not even a sheet of paper can be passed between them. Inca oral tradition held that the site was built with the assistance of divine forces. Spanish chroniclers who arrived in the 16th century described it with barely contained astonishment. Engineer Jean-Pierre Pratzen of the University of California, Berkeley, spent years studying Inca stonework, and concluded that the fitting process likely involved repeated trial and grinding. But the full logistics at this scale, at this altitude, remains softly beyond our reach. On a remote island at the southeastern corner of the Pacific Ocean, nearly 3,400 kilometers from the nearest continental coastline, almost 900 enormous stone figures stand, sit, and gaze across a landscape of grasses and wind. These are the moai of Easter Island, called Rapa Nui by its indigenous people, carved from compressed volcanic ash between roughly 1100 and 1500 CE. The average moai stands 4 meters tall and weighs approximately 13 tons, though the largest ever erected, known as Paro, stood nearly 10 meters and weighed around 74 tons. Archaeologist Joe and Van Tilburg has cataloged all 887 known figures and led experiments attempting to understand how they were moved across the island's terrain. One popular theory, supported by oral tradition, holds that the statues moved upright in a slow rocking motion by teams of people using ropes. But who organized this effort? What the figures truly represented, and why the construction stopped so suddenly and completely, remains one of the Pacific's most quietly enduring whispers. In the high, sun-warmed valley of the Bekaa region in what is now Lebanon, there exists a stone platform so ancient and so massive that its origins have never been satisfactorily explained by any scholar who has stood before it. Baalbek, known in Roman times as Heliopolis, the city of the sun, contains within its foundations a series of stones of extraordinary size. 3 of them, known as the trilithon, each measure approximately 19 meters long, 4 meters high, and 3.5 meters deep, weighing an estimated 800 tons apiece. Nearby lies an unfinished stone still resting in its quarry, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighing over 1,000 tons, the largest known ancient quarried stone in the world. The Romans built their magnificent temple complex of Jupiter above these foundations around the 1st century CE, but the massive stones beneath are believed to predate the Roman construction by centuries, perhaps millennia. Engineer and archaeologist Jean-Pierre Adam studied the site at length and acknowledged that even with modern cranes and technology, moving such stones would be an extraordinary undertaking. Who placed them there, and how, remains an open question resting patiently beneath the Lebanese sky. Let your eyelids be completely easy now, soft and still, with no effort asked of them. Let your fingers rest exactly where they are, unhurried and warm. On the high plain of the Atacama Desert in northern Chile, there are hundreds of geoglyphs, geometric shapes, human figures and animals, etched into the dark hillsides and earth. The most famous of them all, the Atacama Giant, measures approximately 86 meters in height, making it the largest prehistoric anthropomorphic figure ever found anywhere in the world. Created by the Tiwanaku or Atacamino people between 1000 and 1400 CE, according to research by archaeologist Lautaro Núñez, the figure appears to hold a staff or scepter, wears a headdress of rays, and looks out across the desert with a stillness that has outlasted every civilization that has risen and fallen nearby. Some researchers believe it served as a lunar or astronomical calendar, its headdress rays aligning with the rising and setting points of the moon across an 18-year cycle. Others see it as a spiritual guardian, a figure rooted in the earth so deeply that no wind or rain has yet persuaded it to move. It stands there still, vast, patient, tilted gently toward the sky, holding whatever it knows in the warmest, most unhurried silence imaginable. There is a region of ocean in the western Atlantic, roughly between Miami, the island of Bermuda, and the tip of Puerto Rico, where ships and aircraft have disappeared over the decades with a frequency that has never been fully and satisfyingly explained. The Bermuda Triangle, as it was named by writer Vincent Gaddis in a 1964 article in Argosy magazine, covers approximately 500,000 square kilometers of open sea. Among the most cited disappearances is that of Flight 19, a training mission of 5 United States Navy torpedo bombers that vanished on December 5, 1945, followed by one of the rescue aircraft sent to find them. 14 airmen were lost. The Navy's official investigation attributed the loss to navigational disorientation, but the compasses of the lead pilot, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, were behaving strangely. Researcher Lawrence David Cush argued in his 1975 book that many Bermuda Triangle disappearances were exaggerated or misreported, and the U.S. Coast Guard does not recognize the region as especially dangerous. And yet the mystery lingers softly, not as horror, but as a reminder that the ocean is ancient and patient and keeps its own quiet counsel. Somewhere beneath the cold gray surface of the Baltic Sea, between Sweden and Finland, a sonar image captured in 2011 by ocean explorer Peter Lindbergh and his team aboard the research vessel Ocean Explorer showed something unusual resting on the seafloor at a depth of approximately 87 meters. The object, roughly 60 meters in diameter, appeared circular, with a flat top and what seemed to be a raised edge, and directly beneath it, a long track in the sediment as though something had slid slowly across the seabed. The media quickly named it the Baltic Sea Anomaly, and speculation ranged widely. Marine geologist Steve Weiner, who examined samples brought up from the site, suggested the material was volcanic rock, consistent with natural geological formations shaped by glacial movement during the last ice age. Other researchers pointed to the unusual regularity of its outline. No definitive identification has ever been made. The object remains on the seafloor, cool, still, undisturbed, holding whatever it is inside itself with the particular patience that only the deep sea seems to carry so effortlessly. Notice the warmth of wherever your body is resting now. Let that warmth hold you a little more fully with each slow, quiet breath. Off the southern coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan, at depths between 5 and 40 meters beneath the surface of the Pacific, a series of massive rock formations were discovered by diver Kihachiro Aratake in 1986. What he found appeared to be step terraces, flat platforms, carved channels, angular walls, and what some researchers describe as a grand staircase. Structures that, in photographs, look remarkably like the remains of a very ancient building. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist at the University of the Ryukyus, spent years diving the site and argued that it was a man-made monument, possibly dating back 10,000 years or more, to a time when the region was above sea level. Other geologists, including Robert Schock of Boston University, studied the site and concluded that while the formations were striking, they were most likely the result of natural geological processes. Sandstone naturally fractures along straight planes, creating angular shapes. The debate between these two careful, thoughtful scholars has never been fully resolved. The Yonaguni Monument rests beneath the warm Pacific, neither confirming nor denying itself, perfectly still in the blue-green quiet beneath the waves. Off the western coast of the Indian subcontinent, beneath the shallow waters of the Gulf of Combat in Gujarat, India, sonar surveys conducted in 2001 by India's National Institute of Ocean Technology revealed what appeared to be the remains of an ancient submerged settlement. Structures that looked like walls, a gridded street layout, and artifact fragments were detected across an area of roughly 9 kilometers, at depths of approximately 30 to 40 meters. Carbon dating of some recovered material, including a piece of wood, suggested an age of around 9,500 years, which would predate the Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley by several thousand years, and place it among the oldest known human settlements ever found. Archaeologist Graham Hancock brought wide attention to the site in his 2002 book Underworld, proposing it as evidence of a highly developed ancient civilization. Other researchers urged caution, noting that some of the supposed artifacts may have been naturally shaped sediment. The Indian government has funded limited further study, but the site rests there in the warm, shallow water of the Gulf, submerged, patient, and still largely unexplored. Beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, sealed off from the atmosphere of the Earth for an estimated 15 to 25 million years, there lies a lake, Lake Vostok, discovered through radar mapping and confirmed by Russian scientists at the Vostok Research Station, stretches approximately 250 kilometers in length and 50 kilometers in width, making it one of the largest lakes on Earth. It lies beneath nearly 4 kilometers of glacial ice, and its water is kept liquid by geothermal heat rising from below and by the insulating pressure of the ice above. In 2012, a Russian team from the Arctic and Antarctic Research Institute broke through to the lake's surface after more than 2 decades of drilling. The samples they recovered suggested microbial life might be present, though contamination during drilling complicated the results. Scientists believe Lake Vostok may represent one of the most isolated ecosystems on the planet, a world that has been quietly doing whatever it does, entirely undisturbed, for longer than our species has existed. It rests there now beneath the southern ice, in a stillness so complete it feels less like a place and more like the idea of one. Let your breath arrive a little more slowly now. Let your shoulders release any weight they have been quietly carrying. You are still. You are safe. You are warm. In the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean, within the Mariana Trench at depths exceeding 10,000 meters, acoustic monitoring equipment has recorded sounds that researchers have not been able to fully identify or explain. One of the most well-known of these is a sound called the bloop, detected in 1997 by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's hydrophone arrays across thousands of kilometers of open ocean. It was extraordinarily loud, louder than any known biological source, and its frequency profile rose in a way that reminded some researchers of a living creature. NOAA scientists later proposed that the most likely explanation was the fracturing and movement of large Antarctic ice sheets, a process called icequake, but the explanation did not fully silence the question. The Mariana Trench itself remains one of the least explored places on Earth, less thoroughly mapped than the surface of the Moon. Creatures unknown to science almost certainly move through its cold, lightless corridors. The ocean holds more mystery per cubic kilometer than perhaps anywhere else we know, and it does so with the quiet authority of something that has been keeping its own secrets since long before there were names for secrets. Along the banks of the Indus River and its tributaries, across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, a civilization flourished for nearly 1,000 years, and then, around 1900 BCE, it quietly dissolved. The Indus Valley Civilization, also called the Harappan Civilization after one of its two great cities, was home to perhaps 5 million people at its height and stretched across an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Its cities, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa chief among them, were designed with a precision that astonishes modern urban planners. Straight streets laid out on a grid, sophisticated drainage systems, standardized brick sizes, and what appear to be public bathing platforms suggesting a deep cultural emphasis on cleanliness or ritual purity. Archaeologist Sharon Ratnagar has spent decades studying its economy and trade networks. And yet the Indus script found on thousands of small seals and tablets has never been deciphered. No one knows what language these people spoke, what gods they worshipped by name, or what they called themselves. They left an entire civilization behind and took their words with them, folded quietly into the earth. On the island of Crete, in the warm blue cradle of the Aegean Sea, a civilization arose around 2700 BCE that would eventually give birth to the first palace complexes in all of Europe. The Minoans, named by archaeologist Arthur Evans, who excavated their great palace at Knossos beginning in 1900 CE, built multi-storied structures with indoor plumbing, painted their walls with vivid frescoes of leaping dolphins and ceremonial bull vaulting, and traded across the Mediterranean with an ease that suggested a prosperous and deeply organized society. Their writing system, known as Linear A, has never been decoded. Around 1450 BCE, Minoan civilization collapsed. Some researchers point to the catastrophic volcanic eruption of Thera, roughly 110 kilometers to the north, as a contributing force. Others suggest invasion or inter. Now unrest. Archaeologist Sandy McGillivray has proposed that whatever ended them came swiftly and without full warning. The frescoes they left behind show people in celebration, in ceremony, in motion, a people who had no reason from the inside of their days to imagine they would not continue. Let your body settle a little more deeply now. Feel the gentle heaviness behind your eyelids. Your breath is easy and slow, arriving without effort, the way all good things do. In the high desert of the American Southwest, across what is now Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, a people known today as the ancestral Pueblones built extraordinary communities into the faces of sheer sandstone cliffs and across the open mesas of the Colorado Plateau. Their most famous settlement, Cliff Palace at Mesa Verde in Colorado, contains over 150 rooms and 23 ceremonial chambers called kivas, and was constructed around 1190 CE. Archaeologist Linda Cordell, who dedicated much of her career to understanding their culture, noted that by approximately 1300 CE, most of these cliff dwellings had been abandoned. The people moved south into the Rio Grande Valley and beyond, and became the ancestors of today's Pueblo peoples. The reasons for their departure are debated gently but persistently. A prolonged drought between 1276 and 1299 CE, identified in tree ring data by researcher Jeffrey Dean, almost certainly played a role, as did social pressures and possible conflict. But why they left so completely, so finally, leaving rooms still containing pottery and tools, remains a question that the canyon walls have kept in the most unhurried silence. In ancient Greece, in the centuries before the classical age of Socrates and Pericles, there existed a civilization that built great palaces, kept detailed records on clay tablets, and sent ships across the Aegean with trade goods and soldiers. These were the Mycenaeans, and between approximately 1200 and 1150 BCE, their palace culture collapsed entirely, along with nearly every other major civilization in the eastern Mediterranean. The palaces at Mycenae, Turin, Pylos, and Thebes were burned or abandoned. The writing system known as Linear B, which the Mycenaeans used for administrative records, disappeared entirely for several centuries. Historian Eric Klein, in his 2014 book 1177 BC, The Year Civilization Collapsed, argued that the Bronze Age collapse was not caused by any single event, but by a cascading series of disruptions: drought, earthquake, internal unrest, disrupted trade routes and migrations, all arriving within a short enough period that no civilization had the resilience to absorb them all. It remains one of the most dramatic and least fully understood turning points in all of human history, a moment when the ancient world simply exhaled and went quiet. In the jungles of Cambodia, between the 9th and 15th centuries CE, the Khmer Empire built what became the largest pre-industrial urban complex in the world. Angkor, at its height around 1200 CE under King Jayavarman VII, covered an area of over 1,000 square kilometers, home to perhaps 1 million people, a city larger than medieval London or Paris. Its hydraulic network of reservoirs, called barrages, and thousands of kilometers of canals managed water across the entire region with extraordinary sophistication. Archaeologist Damien Evans, using airborne laser mapping technology known as LiDAR, revealed in 2015 that Angkor was even larger and more complex than previously understood, with previously unseen urban grids stretching far into the surrounding forest. And yet by the mid-15th century, Angkor had been largely abandoned. Researchers at the University of Sydney have pointed to prolonged drought interrupted by catastrophic monsoon flooding as key factors, a climate system that the great hydraulic network ultimately could not absorb. The jungle grew back slowly, patiently, reclaiming stone by stone what had once been the beating heart of an empire. Perhaps your fingers have grown still. Perhaps your breath has found its own slow, easy rhythm. Rest there for a moment, in the quiet space between one thought and the next, where everything is simply warm and still. On the southwestern coast of Greenland, in settlements called the Eastern and Western Settlements, Norse colonists established a thriving community beginning around 985 CE, when Eric the Red led an expedition from Iceland. At their height, these communities contained perhaps 4,000 to 5,000 people, with farms, a cathedral, a bishop's seat, and active trade in walrus ivory, furs, and live polar bears with markets in Europe. They endured for nearly 500 years. And then, sometime in the mid-15th century, they were gone. No massacre, no definitive plague, no single catastrophic event has been identified. Archaeologist Niels Linnerup of the University of Copenhagen has studied skeletal remains fr. The settlements and found evidence of increasing nutritional stress and cold adaptation as the climate shifted during the Little Ice Age. Researcher Jard Diamond examined the colony's decline in his 2005 book Collapse, pointing to cultural rigidity, an unwillingness to adopt the survival strategies of the neighboring Inuit as a contributing factor. Whatever the truth, the Norse of Greenland simply ceased to be, leaving behind empty farms and a silence that the Arctic wind has been filling, very gently, ever since. In 1929, in the former imperial palace in Constantinople, a group of scholars cataloging old maps came across something that should not have existed. drawn in 1513 CE by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. This map depicted not only the coastlines of Europe and Africa with remarkable accuracy, at a time when cartographic precision was still largely a matter of estimation, but also showed what appeared to be the coastline of Antarctica, a continent that would not officially be discovered by European explorers until 1820, more than 300 years later. Piri Reis himself wrote notes in the margins explaining that he compiled the map from older source charts, some of which he attributed to the time of Alexander the Great. Cartographer Charles Hapgood, in his 1966 book Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, argued that the southern landmass matched not Antarctica's current ice-covered coastline, but the subglacial topography beneath the ice, something we have only mapped with modern technology. Other scholars dispute the interpretation, but the map itself rests quietly in the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul, neither explaining nor apologizing for itself. Somewhere in a private collection in Rome, and before that in a Jesuit library, and before that in the hands of bookseller Wilfrid Voynich, who purchased it in 1912, there exists a manuscript unlike any other document ever found in the world. The Voynich manuscript, now housed at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, catalogued as MS 408, is a handwritten book of approximately 240 pages, illustrated with drawings of unidentified plants, astronomical diagrams, bathing women, and elaborate circular charts. It is written in an unknown script that flows naturally from left to right, with consistent letter frequencies suggesting it is a real language or cipher. And yet in over a century of dedicated effort, no cryptographer, linguist, or code breaker has ever deciphered a single confirmed word. Carbon dating conducted in 2009 by the University of Arizona placed the vellum's origin between 1404 and 1438 CE. Researcher Stephen Bax proposed partial decipherments of plant names in 2014. Others have suggested it is an elaborate hoax, but it reads, page after page, with the quiet authority of something that genuinely means something to someone, and that someone has not yet arrived. Your breath is slow and easy now. Let your chest rise and fall without any effort at all. Notice the warmth beneath you and let it hold you a little more completely with each breath. In 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers sheltering from a storm near the small island of Antikythera, off the southern coast of Greece, dove into the water to pass the time and found the wreck of a Roman cargo ship from approximately 60 BCE. Among the artifacts they recovered was a corroded lump of bronze that, when examined decades later, turned out to contain the remains of a mechanical device of extraordinary complexity. Over 30 interlocking bronze gears, arranged to model the movements of the sun and moon, predict eclipses, and track the cycles of the Olympic Games. This is the Antikythera mechanism, studied exhaustively by physicist Derek de Solla Price in the 1970s, and more recently by the Antikythera research team using advanced X-ray and surface imaging technology. Price called it, in his 1974 paper, an ancient Greek computer. Nothing else remotely like it has ever been found from that era. The device implies a tradition of sophisticated mechanical engineering that simply vanishes from the historical record, as though someone built one perfect, quiet, intricate machine, and then the knowledge of how to build it was gently, completely forgotten. In a clay jar discovered in the village of Qujat Rabu near Baghdad in modern-day Iraq, sometime around 1936, A German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig found a small terracotta vessel containing a copper cylinder, an iron rod, and traces of what may have been an acidic solution. The object dated to the Parthian period, approximately 250 BCE to 224 CE, and Koenig, examining it in 1940, proposed that it might be an ancient electrochemical cell, in simpler terms, a primitive battery. He described his theory in a scientific paper that has been generating quiet debate ever since. Replicas constructed by researchers at the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum in San Jose, California, filled with grape juke. Or vinegar as the electrolyte, produced approximately 1.1 volts of electricity. What the Baghdad battery, if it is indeed what Koenig believed, was used for has never been established. Electroplating thin gold onto silver objects has been proposed. Others suggest it was used for a medicinal or acupuncture-like treatment. Still others maintain it was simply a storage jar. The original object now rests in the National Museum of Iraq, holding its purpose in its small, patient, terracotta silence. On a small island in the Aegean Sea called Crete, in a palace room at the ancient Minoan site of Phaistos, a circular clay disc was found in 1908 by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier. Roughly 15 centimeters in diameter, the Phaistos disc is stamped on both sides with a spiral sequence of pictographic signs, 242 symbols in total, drawn from a set of 45 distinct images that include a walking figure, a plumed head, a beehive, a fish, a cat, an arrow, and what appears to be a ship. The symbols were pressed into the wet clay with individual stamps, suggesting, remarkably, a primitive precursor to movable type printing, thousands of years before Gutenberg. The disc dates to the Middle Bronze Age, approximately 1700 BCE. No agreed translation has ever been produced. Linguist Yves Duhoux has argued that the language is almost certainly not Linear A or any other known Minoan script. Some researchers believe it is a prayer or a hymn. Others suggest a calendar or an administrative record. It sits now in the Heraclean Archaeological Museum in Crete, stamped, spiraled, sealed, and it has not yet spoken a single word to anyone who has listened. Let your eyelids be soft and still. Let your jaw rest completely easy. You are warm, you are safe, and there is nowhere further to go tonight than right here. On Easter Island, on wooden tablets, and on the bodies of the Rapa Nui people themselves, there existed a writing system unlike any other known script in all of Polynesia. It was called Rongorongo, meaning, in the Rapa Nui language, something close to chanting or recitation, and it was found inscribed on approximately 24 surviving wooden objects, most now held in museums across Europe and the Americas. The script consists of small, intricate carved figures, human forms, animals, plants, geometric shapes, arranged in alternating lines that are read in a technique called boustrophedon, rotating the tablet 180 degrees with each new line. When European missionaries arrived in the 1860s and decimated the island's population through introduced disease and slave raids to South America, almost everyone who could read Rongorongo died. Linguist Stephen Fisher made a partial proposed decipherment in 1995, suggesting that some tablets recorded a creation chant. The broader scholarly community received it with cautious interest but no consensus. A language that was once sung aloud, carved carefully into wood, and carried from person to person across a generation, now waits in museum cases, perfectly still, perfectly silent, perfectly itself. In the Sahara Desert in southern Egypt, near the Sudanese border, a collection of standing stones and stone circles sits on a flat, sun-baked plain called Nabta Playa. And it is, according to some researchers, the oldest known astronomical site in the world. Constructed by a nomadic cattle herding people between approximately 7000 and 6500 BCE, the site predates Stonehenge by more than 4,000 years. Archaeoastronomer J. McKim Malville of the University of Colorado studied the site extensively in the 1990s and found that certain stones appear to align with the summer solstice sunrise, when the first rains would have arrived to fill the playa with seasonal water, a moment of profound importance for a desert people whose lives depended on that rhythm. Other alignments have been proposed for the star Sirius and for the belt stars of Orion. A researcher named Thomas Brophy went further, suggesting the site encoded naked-eye astronomical observations of extraordinary precision. Whether those claims hold under scrutiny or not, Nabta Playa remains a quiet, sun-warmed testament to the fact that human beings have been watching the sky, patiently, devotedly, carefully, for far longer than most of our histories have allowed. In a small farming village in central Germany, near the town of Göbekli in Saxony-Anhalt, workers excavating a field in 1991 discovered something buried just beneath the surface that would become one of the most significant archaeological finds in European prehistory. The Göbekli Circle, uncovered fully and reconstructed beginning in 2002, is a circular enclosure approximately 75 meters in diameter, built from concentric ditches and wooden palisades, with 3 gateway openings oriented toward the sunrise and sunset at the winter solstice. It dates to approximately 4900 BCE, making it one of the earliest known solar observatories ever found, predating Stonehenge by more than 2,000 years. Archaeologist Francois Berdimes of Martin Luther University led the excavation and identified the site as both a ceremonial gathering place and a solar calendar used for determining the timing of agricultural rituals. The people who built it, part of what archaeologists call the stroke-ornamented ware culture, left no written records, no names, no explanations. Only this, a circle, open to the winter sky, waiting for a specific morning of light to arrive at a specific moment, as it always had and always would. Perhaps your breathing has grown slower without you noticing. Let your exhale be a little longer, a little softer, like a tide withdrawing gently from a warm shore. In 1999, a farmer plowing a field near the town of Nebra in the German state of Saxony-Anhalt unearthed a bronze disc approximately 32 centimeters in diameter, inlaid with gold symbols, a large circle representing the full moon or sun, a crescent, and a cluster of dots widely interpreted as the Pleiades star cluster. This is the Nebra sky disk, dated through associated artifacts and metallurgical analysis to approximately 1600 BCE, making it the oldest known concrete depiction of astronomical phenomena ever found anywhere in the world. Researcher Harold Meller, director of the State Museum of Prehistory in Halle, has studied it extensively and proposed that the disk functioned as a sophisticated astronomical instrument used to harmonize the solar and lunar calendars, helping Bronze Age farmers determine when to plant and when to harvest. 2 golden arcs along its edges, since partly removed in antiquity, spanned exactly 82 degrees. The precise difference between the summer and winter solstice sunrises as seen from the Middelburg Hill where it was found. A small, golden, circular object from the Bronze Age that encoded the movement of the sky with the quiet precision of a clock. On the eastern coast of Ireland, in County Meath, there is a passage tomb that was built approximately 5,200 years ago, older than Stonehenge, older than the Great Pyramid at Giza. Newgrain is a circular mound roughly 80 meters in diameter, covering an inner cruciform chamber reached by a 19-meter stone passage. Above the entrance, there is a small rectangular opening called a roof box, precisely engineered so that on the mornings around the winter solstice, the shortest days of the year, a shaft of golden sunlight enters through the opening and travels the full length of the passage to illuminate the inner chamber floor for approximately 17 minutes. Archaeologist Michael O'Kelly, who excavated Newgrange between 1962 and 1975, was the first modern person to witness this phenomenon when he stood alone in the chamber on the morning of December 21st, 1969, and watched the light arrive. The people who designed this alignment did so with a precision that required not only mathematical skill, but also a deep, patient, multi-generational devotion to the movement of the sky, as though they were building a letter to the future, written in light. Let your body grow heavy and still. Let the weight of your limbs be something welcome now, a warmth, a settledness, a quiet reminder that you are held and safe and exactly where you are meant to be. In the high desert of southern Egypt, carved in low relief on the ceiling of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a temple complex largely built during the Ptolemaic period, around 50 BCE, there is a circular zodiac of extraordinary beauty and complexity. The Dendera zodiac, now residing in the Louvre Museum in Paris, depicts the northern sky in a circular format, populated with figures from the Egyptian and Greek astronomical traditions. The 12 signs of the zodiac, the 36 decans, and figures representing the planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn positioned among the constellations. When it was removed from the ceiling by French agents in 1820 and replaced with a plaster replica, it sparked enormous scholarly debate about its age and meaning. Researchers Sylvie Colville and Eric Auberg analyzed it in detail in 1997 and proposed that it encoded a specific astronomical date, the night sky of June 15th, 50 BCE, possibly marking a celestial event of ritual importance. Others have proposed it as a comprehensive map of the entire sky as understood by Egyptian astronomers of that era. The original stone disk lies in Paris now, calm and circular, carrying the ancient sky on its face like a memory the stone has simply decided to keep. In a flat valley in North Yorkshire in England, 3 large henges stand in near-perfect alignment with one another, stretching across roughly 1 kilometer of landscape. These are the Thornborough henges, 3 circular earthwork enclosures each approximately 240 meters in diameter, built between approximately 350 and 2500 BCE, making them among the largest henge monuments in all of Britain. Researcher Jan Harding of Newcastle University has studied the site extensively and proposed that the 3 henges were deliberately aligned to mirror the 3 belt stars of the Orion constellation, the same stars that are also reflected in the alignment of the 3 pyramids at Giza, an observation famously proposed by Robert Bovell in his Orion correlation theory of 1994. Whether the Giza or Thornborough alignments were truly intentional remains debated among archaeologists and astronomers. But the Thornborough henges endure, wide, grassy, circular, and patient, resting in the Yorkshire landscape like three quiet questions that the stars have been quietly looking down upon, without urgency, for 5,000 years. In and around the small city of Taos in northern New Mexico, United States, a significant portion of the population has been hearing something for decades that most people around them simply cannot hear at all. It is described as a low, persistent hum, somewhere between the idling of a diesel engine and a distant machinery vibration, felt as much in the chest and the bones as it is heard with the ears. The Taos hum, as it has been named, has been reported consistently since at least the early 1990s, and a formal scientific investigation was conducted in 1995 by a team that included researchers from Sandia National Laboratories, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the University of New Mexico. Their report, submitted to Congress, found that the hum was real to those who experienced it but could not identify a definitive source. More recent research by scientist Glenn MacPherson, who has studied low-frequency sound phenomena extensively, has proposed that some sufferers may be perceiving very low-frequency radio transmissions or seismic microvibrations. Others have suggested geological or geothermal sources. The Taos hum continues today, persistent, gentle, sourceless, heard by some, and invisible to others, like a sound the earth is making only for those willing to listen in the right kind of quiet. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, something arrived from space over the remote Podkamennaya-Tunguska River region of Siberia and released an explosion estimated at 10 to 15 megatons, roughly 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, flattening approximately 2,000 square kilometers of forest and felling an estimated 80 million trees. This is the Tunguska event, and it remains the largest impact event in recorded human history. Because the region was so remote, no scientific expedition reached the site until 1927, when Soviet mineralogist Leonid Kulik led the first investigation. Remarkably, no impact crater was ever found, and no confirmed fragments of the incoming object have ever been conclusively identified from the site. The most widely accepted explanation among researchers, supported by a 2013 study published in the journal Planetary and Space Science, is that a small asteroid or comet approximately 50 to 80 meters in diameter exploded in the atmosphere before reaching the ground in what is called an airburst. The forest beneath it simply lay down, radially, silently, in perfect order, like a vast, unhurried exhale from the sky. Let your breath soften now. Let your chest be loose and easy. Notice how still your hands are, how gently they are resting, doing nothing at all. In the Hesteland Valley of central Norway, a narrow farming valley approximately 15 kilometers long surrounded by low mountains, lights have been observed moving through the night sky since at least the 1930s, with a period of particularly intense activity recorded between 1981 and 1984, when they were seen on average 20 times per week. The Hesteland lights, as they have come to be known, appear as floating, glowing orbs of white, yellow, or red light, sometimes stationary, sometimes moving rapidly, sometimes pulsing. Project Hesteland, a scientific monitoring initiative established in 1983 by a group of Norwegian, Swedish, and American scientists, including researcher Erling Strand of Ostfold University College, has collected extensive instrumental data on the phenomenon. Proposed explanations include piezoelectric effects from geological stress in the valley's crystalline bedrock, plasma phenomena arising from ionized dust particles, and combustion of hydrogen and oxygen gas released by geological processes. No single explanation has satisfied all the available evidence. The lights continue to appear over the valley, calm and unhurried, glowing softly against the Norwegian dark, as though the valley itself has been quietly illuminated from somewhere deep below. On the flat, cracked surface of Racetrack Playa, a dry lakebed in Death Valley National Park in California, hundreds of rocks, some weighing as much as 320 kilograms, have left long furrows across the pale, hardened mud, as though they have moved on their own across the otherwise empty surface. These are the sailing stones of Death Valley, and for most of the 20th century, their movement was entirely unexplained. Scientists proposed various mechanisms: strong winds, thin films of ice, bacterial mats reducing friction, but no one had ever directly observed the stones in motion. Then, in 2014, a team led by researchers Richard Norris and James Norris from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography published a study in the journal PLOS-1 Documenting. For the first time, direct observation and GPS tracking of the rocks moving. In winter, a thin layer of ice forms on the playa surface. When it melts partially in the afternoon sun and breaks into floating panels, the wind pushes these ice sheets gently against the rocks, sliding them forward at speeds of 2 to 5 meters per minute. So slowly, so quietly, that you would not notice unless you watched for hours. The mystery has been softly answered, but the tracks in the dried mud remain, patient and strange and beautiful. In the deserts of the world, in the Sahara, in the Arabian Peninsula, in the Atacama, in the dunes of coastal China, there is a phenomenon that travelers and researchers have documented for centuries: sand that sings. Singing or booming sand dunes produce a deep, resonant, sustained sound, sometimes compared to a low musical note, sometimes to the distant drone of an aircraft, when the surface layer of sand grains slides down a dune's face in the right conditions. The sound can last for several minutes and can be heard from kilometers away. Marco Polo documented the phenomenon in the 13th century during his travels through the Gobi Desert. Charles Darwin wrote about singing sands during his voyage on the HMS Beagle in 1831. Physicist Bruno Andreotti of the University of Paris studied the acoustics extensively in the early 2000s and found that the sound is produced when sand grains of a particular size and roundness synchronize their vibrations, essentially hundreds of millions of tiny particles finding a single shared frequency and sustaining it together. The desert in these moments becomes a vast, open, unhurried instrument, playing a note that no one asked for and no one needs to explain to feel moved by. Perhaps your jaw has softened without you noticing. Let your breath arrive a little more slowly, a little more easily, as though your body has remembered something it always knew how to do. On a stretch of coastline near the small town of Moeraki in the Otago region of New Zealand's South Island, resting on a gray pebble beach where the Pacific meets the land in soft, unhurried waves, there are spherical boulders, dozens of them, that emerge from the eroding mudstone cliffs and settle onto the shore. The Moeraki boulders, the largest of which measures approximately 2 meters in diameter, are septarian concretions, geological formations created when minerals gradually crystallize around a central point within marine sediment over millions of years. The process that formed them began approximately 60 million years ago on the floor of a shallow Paleocene sea. Geologist Cam Nelson of the University of Waikato has studied the formation process extensively, determining that most of the large boulders took between 4 and 5.5 million years to form, growing so slowly, so patiently, one microscopic crystal layer at a time, that the pace makes the human lifespan feel like a single-held breath. Maori oral tradition calls them te kaihinaki, the baskets, nets, and gourds of the ancestor figure Arachuru, and perhaps that framing holds something true about them. These are things that arrived from an ancient, patient process and came to rest on the shore exactly when they were ready. In 2008, in a cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia called Denisova Cave, archaeologists from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology were sorting through sediment when they found a small fragment of bone, a piece of a finger, no larger than a fingertip. When geneticist Svante Pääbo and his team sequenced the DNA from this fragment, they discovered something that reshaped the entire story of human prehistory. The bone belonged to a previously unknown group of ancient humans, now called the Denisovans, who had been living across a vast stretch of Asia at the same time as both Neanderthals and early modern humans. The Denisovans have never been found as a complete skeleton. Only a handful of teeth, fragments of bone, and traces of their genome, which lives on today in the DNA of modern Melanesian, Aboriginal Australian, and some Southeast Asian populations, who carry between 3 and 5% Denisovan ancestry. Who they were, what they looked like, how they lived, what languages they spoke, nearly all of it remains softly and entirely unknown. An entire branch of humanity identified on. Lie from a fragment of a child's finger, resting in the ancient dark of a Siberian cave. On the Indonesian island of Flores, in a cave called Liang Bua, archaeologists in 2003 made one of the most remarkable and debated discoveries in the history of paleoanthropology. They found the remains of a small hominin, an adult female, standing approximately 1 meter tall with a brain roughly 1/3 the size of a modern human's, who had lived on the island until as recently as 50,000 years ago. Researcher Michael Morwood and his team named this species Homo floresiensis and proposed that it was a distinct branch of the human family, possibly descended from Homo erectus populations that became isolated on Flores and gradually reduced in body size through a process called island dwarfism. The popular press quickly named her the Hobbit, but the scientific debate has been anything but settled. Some researchers have argued the individual was a modern human with a pathological condition. Others maintain she represents a genuinely separate species. A 2016 study narrowed her dating to between 100,000 and 60,000 years ago, making her a near contemporary of early modern humans. Somewhere on a tropical island, a small, quiet people lived and vanished, leaving only bones and questions in the red volcanic soil. Your breath is soft and easy. Let your shoulders release a little more. Feel the warmth of wherever you are resting. Let it hold you completely, the way the earth has always held everything placed gently upon it. In the caves and rock shelters of southwestern China's Yunnan and Guizhou provinces, skeletal remains were found between 1979 and 2012 that belonged to a group of ancient humans researchers named the Red Deer Cave people. So called because the bones of red deer were found alongside them. These individuals had a puzzling mix of anatomical features, rounded brain cases and small faces that looked remarkably modern, combined with thick skull bones, large molar teeth, prominent brow ridges, and a flattened forehead more reminiscent of much earlier hominins. The youngest of these individuals lived as recently as 11,500 years ago. Researcher Darren Curnow of the University of New South Wales, who led analysis of the remains published in the journal PLOS 1 in 2012, proposed that they may represent either a late surviving archaic human species or an early population of modern humans with unusually primitive features. No DNA has yet been successfully extracted from the warm, humid cave environment. The Red Deer Cave people remain one of the most anatomically enigmatic groups ever found, a face from the deep past that does not quite fit any category we have made for it, resting gently at the edge of what we think we understand. There is a question that the greatest philosophers, neuroscientists, and physicists of the modern era have sat with for decades, and it has not yet been answered in any form that fully satisfies those who ask it. The question is simply this: why does subjective experience exist at all? Why is there something it feels like to see the color of the evening sky, to hear a piece of music that moves you without words, to feel warmth spreading from your chest when you are safe? Philosopher David Chalmers named this the hard problem of consciousness in a landmark 1994 paper, distinguishing it from the so-called easy problems of explaining how the brain processes information and produces behavior. Neural correlates of consciousness have been mapped extensively by researchers, including Christoph Koch at the Allen Institute for Brain Science. And yet the gap between brain activity and felt experience remains as wide and as quiet as it has ever been. We are aware. We experience. And why that should be true, why matter arranged in a certain way should suddenly feel, is perhaps the deepest, most ancient, most softly unanswerable question any mind has ever turned toward itself. Approximately 70,000 years ago, according to research by geologist Michael Rampino of New York University and others, the Toba supervolcano on the island of Sumatra in present-day Indonesia erupted in what is believed to have been the largest volcanic event in the past 2 million years. The eruption ejected an estimated 2,800 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere, producing a volcanic winter that may have lasted several years and dramatically reduced global temperatures. Genetic studies of modern human populations, notably a 1998 analysis by researcher Lynn Jord and colleagues published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, have found evidence of a severe genetic bottleneck in our species around this time, suggesting that the entire global population of Homo sapiens may have been reduced to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. If that is true, every human being alive today is descend. From a remarkably small group of people who survived a cold, ash-darkened world and simply held on, quietly, patiently, together. The thought of that is not a frightening one. It is, in its own soft way, one of the most tender facts in all of history. Perhaps somewhere between 60,000 and 80,000 years ago, something shifted in the human mind. Cave paintings appeared, beads were strung, ochre was ground and applied to skin, musical instruments were carved from bone. The dead began to be buried with flowers and tools, as though whoever was doing the burying understood that death was a passage, not merely an ending. This moment, referred to by researchers like archaeologist Richard Klein of Stanford University as the Great Leap Forward, or more gently as the emergence of behavioral modernity, has never been fully explained. The brain of Homo sapiens had been anatomically modern for at least 100,000 years before any of this began, leading some researchers to propose that a genetic mutation, perhaps affecting the capacity for complex language, triggered the change. Others, like cognitive archaeologist Francesco D'Erico, argue the shift was more gradual and geographically uneven than Klein suggested. Whatever happened, a mind that had been capable of remarkable things for a long time suddenly began expressing them, and the world it left behind became, for the first time, genuinely legible. A warmth entered the record, and it has never fully left. You are halfway through this journey now, dear listener. And perhaps you have noticed your body has been settling quietly on its own. Notice wherever you are right now. The weight of your limbs, the ease of your jaw. Perhaps your eyelids are heavy or your shoulders have dropped a little lower than they were. Let your breath be a little longer on the exhale, unhurried, soft, arriving and departing without effort. You are warm. You are still. There is nothing asked of you in this moment except to simply remain here, exactly as you are, held and safe and breathing. Let the weight of everything you carry be set down, just for now, just for this soft and ancient night. And we continue. Somewhere beneath the streets and harbors of the ancient Roman world, a construction material was laid down that has endured for over 2,000 years, in some cases strengthening itself over time rather than weakening. Roman marine concrete, used to build harbor walls, piers, and breakwaters across the Mediterranean, was made from a mixture of volcanic ash called pozzolana, seawater, and lime. Modern concrete, by contrast, typically begins to degrade within 50 years when exposed to seawater. Geologist Marie Jackson of the University of California, Berkeley, led a study published in the journal American Mineralogist in 2017 that found that seawater slowly percolating through the Roman concrete was causing a mineral called aluminous tobermorite to crystallize within the structure over centuries, actually reinforcing it from within, the way a slow, patient process of growth reinforces bone. The Romans did not fully understand why their concrete worked so well. They had discovered, through observation and practice, a recipe that modern materials scientists are only now beginning to fully decode. A harbor wall in Caesarea Maritima in Israel, built by Herod the Great around 20 BCE, still stands in the Mediterranean surf, 2,000 years of salt water having made it somehow, only more quietly enduring. For centuries, swordsmiths in the Middle East produced blades of such exceptional quality that they became legendary across the medieval world. These were Damascus steel blades, characterized by their distinctive wavy, flowing surface patterns called damask, by their extraordinary sharpness, and by a flexibility that allowed them to bend without breaking. European crusaders encountered them in battle and wrote about them with barely concealed astonishment. The finest Damascus steel was produced from ingots of Wootz steel imported from southern India, processed through a technique that has never been fully reproduced in the modern era. Metallurgist J.D. Verhoeven of Iowa State University and swordsmith Alfred Pendre spent years attempting to recreate the original process and published their findings in 1998. They discovered that trace elements of vanadium, chromium, and manganese in the original ore played a critical role, and that without those specific geological impurities, no amount of skill in the forging process could reproduce the pattern or the properties. When the particular mines supplying that ore were exhausted, sometime around 1750 CE, the knowledge of how to make true Damascus steel quietly disappeared. A craft so dependent on a specific piece of the earth that, when the earth changed, the craft simply faded. Notice the weight of your body right now, the soft heaviness of your limbs, the gentle pressure of where you rest. Let everything be exactly as it is, unhurried and still. In the harbors and coastal waters of the ancient Mediterranean world, for a period of several centuries beginning around the 5th century BCE and ending sometime in the 7th century CE. Greek and later Byzantine naval forces made use of an incendiary weapon that their enemies described with a mixture of terror and bewilderment, and that no modern chemist or historian has ever been able to fully reconstruct. Greek fire, or more precisely, the Byzantine liquid fire, could burn on the surface of water, could not be extinguished by water, and was projected through bronze siphons mounted on naval vessels, igniting enemy ships with a burning that witnesses described as seeming to have its own will. The formula was a closely guarded state secret of the Byzantine Empire, restricted to a single family of engineers descended from the Syrian architect Kallinikos, who reportedly introduced the weapon around 672 CE. When the Byzantine Empire fell in 1453, the formula was lost entirely. Modern researchers have proposed compositions involving quicklime, naphtha, pine resin, and sulfur, but no proposed formula has replicated all the described properties simultaneously. Greek fire burned across Byzantine history like a flame that, when it finally went out, left nothing behind, not even its own explanation. In the Zhejiang province of southeastern China, near the town of Longyu in Quezhou County, a farmer draining a pond in 1992 discovered that beneath the water lay not a natural geological feature, but an enormous hand-carved stone cavern. Further investigation revealed not one but 24 such caverns, each carved from solid siltstone to a height of approximately 30 meters, connected by narrow stone walls and accessed through small above-ground openings that gave no hint of what lay below. The Longyu Caves, as they came to be known, cover a total area of approximately 30,000 square meters. Yet no historical record, no ancient text, no oral tradition preserved any memory of their construction. Every surface inside the caverns is covered with a precise parallel line chisel pattern, applied with extraordinary consistency. Archaeologist Fan Jinshi and researchers at the Chinese Heritage Institute have attempted to determine their age through dating of the tools and technique, estimating they were carved during the pre-Qin period, before 221 BCE. How tens of thousands of cubic meters of rock were removed, where the material went, who organized the labor, none of it has been explained. The caverns simply exist, cool and vast and patient, beneath the farmland of eastern China. Deep beneath the city of Derinkuyu in the Cappadocia region of central Turkey, there exists an underground city carved from soft volcanic rock, not a small refuge or a seasonal shelter, but a full urban complex capable of housing an estimated 20,000 people, complete with stables, wineries, oil presses, storage rooms, chapels, schools, and ventilation shafts reaching down 18 stories below ground level. Derinkuyu was discovered in 1963 when a resident renovating his home broke through a wall to find a tunnel behind it. Archaeologist Omer Demir investigated the site extensively, and subsequent surveys have revealed that Derinkuyu was connected by tunnels to at least 2 other underground cities in the region, including Göbekli, through passages stretching several kilometers. The city is believed to have been carved and expanded over many centuries, possibly beginning as early as the 8th century BCE, with its deepest levels perhaps hewn by the Phrygians. Stone doors several meters in diameter could be rolled from the inside to seal each level in case of attack. Who first conceived of carving an entire civilization downward into the earth, and why remains only partially answered, like a question asked very quietly into a very deep and very patient dark. Let your eyelids be completely soft now. Let your fingers rest without effort. Your breath is slow and deep and warm, and there is nothing in this moment that needs your attention except the gentle drift of rest. In the town of Homestead in southern Florida, there stands a remarkable structure built in almost complete secrecy by a single man working alone over a period of nearly 30 years. Edward Leedskalnin, a Latvian immigrant who stood approximately 1.5 meters tall and weighed roughly 50 kilograms, began construction of what he called Rock Gate Park, later renamed Coral Castle, in 1923, completing it around 1951. Using coral limestone blocks quarried from the local bedrock, some weighing as much as 30 tons, Leedskalnin single-handedly erected walls, towers, carved furniture, telescopes, and a 9-ton gate so precisely balanced on a central bearing that it could be opened with a single finger. He worked exclusively at night and refused all observers. When asked how he moved the massive stones, he told neighbors only that he understood the secrets of the ancient Egyptians. No satisfying mechanical explanation for how one small man moved and placed such enormous stones without heavy machinery has ever been demonstrated by researchers, despite numerous engineering studies. Leedskalnin died in 1951, leaving behind no plans, no notes, and no explanation, only a garden of enormous stones, resting quietly in the Florida warmth. Across the landscape of Britain and Western Europe, there exists a theory, one that has never been scientifically confirmed, but has never entirely disappeared from the conversation either, that certain ancient sacred sites are connected by invisible straight lines of energy or alignment running across the Earth's surface. These are called ley lines, a term coined by amateur archaeologist Alfred Watkins in his 1922 book The Old Straight Track, in which he proposed that ancient trackways connecting hilltops, stone circles, churches, and sacred wells followed perfectly straight alignments across the countryside. Watkins himself saw them as ancient trade and travel routes rather than lines of mystical force. The spiritual dimension was added by later writers. Researcher Paul Devereaux, who has spent decades investigating what he calls landscape archaeoastronomy, has pointed out that many alignments can be found by statistical chance alone in any landscape dotted with ancient monuments. And yet when one stands at a site like Avebury in Wiltshire and looks across the surrounding hills toward the horizon, there is an undeniable feeling, quiet, unhurried, not requiring explanation, that whoever chose this place was responding to something in the land itself, something ancient and patient that drew human attention the way water draws the eye in a dry place. In the rolling countryside of northern France, in the department of Eure-et-Loire, there stands a cathedral begun in 1194 CE and largely completed by 1220, a building that art historian Henry Adams called, in his 1904 book Mont Saint-Michel and Chartres, perhaps the most perfect expression of medieval Christianity ever achieved in stone. What continues to fascinate researchers about Chartres Cathedral is not only its soaring Gothic architecture or its extraordinary medieval stained glass windows, the largest surviving collection in the world, but certain geometric properties embedded in its design. Researcher John James spent 15 years studying the construction marks left by individual medieval masons and found evidence of at least 9 distinct teams working in sequence, each with its own geometric vocabulary. Others, like architect and researcher Keith Critchlow, have proposed that the cathedral's ground plan encodes precise proportional relationships derived from Pythagorean geometry and musical harmonic ratios. Whether this sacred mathematics was consciously intended by the master builder, who remains unnamed in any historical record, or arose organically from a tradition of craft knowledge passed quietly from master to apprentice, remains a question as high and as open as the cathedral's vaulted ceiling itself. Let your breath be soft and slow. Let your chest rise and fall without effort. Feel the quiet warmth of wherever you are, and let yourself be held there gently and completely. In the high Golan heights of what is now northern Israel, northeast of the Sea of Galilee, there lies a monument that few outside the world of archaeology have heard of, and yet it may be one of the most significant megalithic structures ever found in the Middle East. Rujum el-Hiri, an Aramaic name meaning stone heap of the wild cat, consists of 5 concentric circles of basalt stone, the outermost reaching approximately 150 meters in diameter, with a central burial cairn rising several meters high. The entire structure contains an estimated 40,000 tons of basalt rock and is believed to have been built between roughly 3000 and 2700 BCE. Archaeologist Yoni Mizrachi has studied the site and found that its northeastern gateway aligns with the sunrise at the summer solstice, suggesting celestial intent similar to Stonehenge. Aerial surveys reveal the full pattern of the circles only from above, like Stonehenge, like the Nazca lines, like so many ancient things. It was built to be seen from a perspective that its builders could not themselves occupy, as though it were a message composed for someone further away in time, or perhaps further away in the sky. On a low rise above the floodplain of Brush Creek in Adams County, Ohio, there winds a massive earthwork in the shape of a serpent, its body coiling sinuously for over 412 meters across the landscape, its open mouth aimed toward the setting sun at the summer solstice. The Great Serpent Mound is the largest known serpentine effigy mound in the world, and it was likely built by the Fort Ancient culture around 1070 CE, though some researchers have proposed an earlier construction by the Adena people, with the date pushed back as far as 300 BCE. Archaeologist Bradley Lepper of the Ohio Historical Society has studied the site for many years and noted the astronomical alignments of its curves with several solar and lunar events across the calendar. The mound was first described by Ephraim Squeer and Edwin Davis in their 1848 Survey Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. What the serpent meant to the people who shaped it, what story or prayer or understanding it expressed, has not been preserved in any record we have found. It lies in the Ohio landscape, coiled and patient, holding its meaning the way a dreaming animal holds its warmth. Beneath the streets of Valletta on the Mediterranean island of Malta, excavated between 1902 and 1906, there exists a complex of underground chambers carved from solid limestone that has been called by historian Richard Cavendish one of the most impressive prehistoric monuments in the entire world. The hypogeum of Hal Saflieni was in use as a burial site from approximately 4000 BCE, and its deepest level, carved some 10 meters below the surface, contains a room known as the Oracle Chamber, where a human voice produces an extraordinary acoustic effect. A low male voice speaking in the chamber resonates at a frequency of approximately 110 Hz, filling the entire space with a sustained, enveloping sound that researcher Paolo De Bertales of the University of Trieste has found may affect activity in the temporal lobes of the brain, potentially inducing trance-like states. The same resonant frequency has been found at other Neolithic sites, including Newgrange and Wayland's Smithy. Whether this acoustic engineering was intentional, whether the ancient builders of Malta somehow understood the relationship between stone architecture and human consciousness, remains one of the most quietly extraordinary open questions in all of prehistoric research. Perhaps your jaw has completely released by now. Perhaps your shoulders have found a softness they did not have when you first settled in. Let your breath be as slow and as easy as it wants to be. There is no pace required here, no effort needed, nothing but this gentle drift. In 2006, archaeologist Mark Horton of the University of Bristol announced the discovery of what he believed to be remains of a significant ancient structure, buried beneath the surface of an oak forest in Sherwood Forest, Nottinghamshire. But the site that captures a far deeper kind of quiet wonder is one already well known and long debated. Oak Island, off the coast of Nova Scotia in Canada, where since 1795 a mysterious shaft known as the Money Pit has drawn treasure hunters, engineers, and researchers into its depths. The first explorers found the shaft filled with layers of logs at regular 10-foot intervals descending into the earth. And as they dug, the pit flooded with seawater through what appeared to be an engineered drainage system connected to the ocean. Subsequent excavations over 2 centuries, involving teams of engineers, investors, and researchers including, reportedly, Franklin D. Roosevelt and Errol Flynn among early enthusiasts, have recovered fragments of parchment, links of a gold chain, and coconut fiber, but no definitive treasure. Geologist Robert Dunfield excavated extensively in 1965 without resolution. The prevailing theory suggests an elaborate and deliberate engineering project, but by whom, when, and to conceal what, remains a mystery as deep as the island's flooded, patient, unyielding earth. On the night of August 15, 1977, astronomer Jerry Amon was reviewing data printouts from Ohio State University's Big Ear Radio Telescope, a facility dedicated to scanning the sky for signs of intelligent extraterrestrial signals as part of the SETI program, when he noticed something that made him circle a sequence of numbers and letters in red pen and write a single word in the margin. Wow! The signal he had found, now known simply as the WOW. Signal lasted for the full 72 seconds that the telescope's beam swept across the relevant area of sky, matching several of the predicted characteristics of an interstellar transmission, including a frequency close to the 1420 MHz hydrogen line, considered a universal landmark frequency that any technologically advanced civilization would likely recognize. The signal has never been detected again, despite dozens of subsequent searches targeting the same region of sky, most recently a 2020 search led by researcher Paris Hirhouni using the Arrogat's radio telescope. No natural explanation has been confirmed. No artificial one has been proven. The signal sits in the record, a single annotated line on a paper printout, now preserved as one of the most quietly extraordinary moments in the history of scientific listening, still unexplained, still waiting to be understood. In 1950, the physicist Enrico Fermi was walking to lunch with colleagues at Los Alamos National Laboratory when, following a casual conversation about recent reports of UFO sightings, he suddenly asked, "But where is everybody?" The question, now called the Fermi paradox, points to a profound and deeply unresolved tension at the heart of modern astronomy. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. It contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies, each holding hundreds of billions of stars. Many of those stars have planets, and many of those planets orbit within the habitable zones where liquid water could exist. Statistician Frank Drake formalized the question in his 1961 Drake equation, estimating the number of communicating civilizations in our galaxy, and arrived at numbers ranging from 1 to potentially millions depending on the assumptions used. Researcher Robin Hansen proposed in 1990 what he called the Great Filter, the idea that something, somewhere in the development of life or technology, acts as an almost insurmountable barrier. Whether that filter lies behind us or ahead of us is, perhaps, the most important unanswered question our civilization has ever quietly placed on the table. Your breath is soft and deep. Let your eyelids rest completely. Let your fingers be still. You are warm, and the quiet around you is a gentle and ancient thing. In 1972, NASA launched Pioneer 10, and in 1973, Pioneer 11 twin spacecraft sent on trajectories that would carry them out of the solar system and into interstellar space, the first human-made objects ever to travel that far from the sun. For decades, scientists tracked their positions precisely using radio signals. And as the decades accumulated, researchers noticed something quietly troubling. Both spacecraft were decelerating very slightly more than the laws of physics, as understood through Newton's gravitational equations and general relativity, predicted they should. This became known as the Pioneer anomaly, and it occupied the attention of physicist John Anderson at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory for many years. A comprehensive study published in 2012 by Slava Turyshev and colleagues, after carefully accounting for the tiny but real pressure exerted by heat radiating unevenly from the spacecraft's nuclear power source, found that thermal recoil explained most of the anomaly. Most, but the precision of the solution and the tidiness of its accounting have satisfied some researchers more than others. For a time, it seemed as though the mathematics that governs everything had whispered something slightly different to two small spacecraft heading alone through the dark. The universe is made of something we cannot see, cannot touch, cannot measure directly, and cannot fully explain. And there is, according to the best current models in physics, about 5 times more of it than all the visible matter in the cosmos combined. This is dark matter, a term first used in its modern sense by astronomer Fritz Zwicky in 1933, when he observed that the galaxies in the Coma cluster were moving far too fast for the visible mass of the cluster to hold them together through gravity alone. Vera Rubin and Kent Ford confirmed the phenomenon in the 1970s by mapping the rotation curves of spiral galaxies and finding that the outer edges rotated just as fast as the inner regions. Impossible, unless vast amounts of invisible mass surrounded each galaxy in a great dark halo. Despite decades of searching through experiments including the Lux detector in South Dakota and the Xenon 1T experiment in Italy's Gran Sasso laboratory, no dark matter particle has ever been directly detected. Something immense and invisible and patient holds the architecture of the cosmos together, and it has not yet introduced itself by any name we recognize. Let's drift onward together. Since 2007, astronomers and physicists have been detecting brief, extraordinarily powerful bursts of radio waves arriving from distant galaxies. Events so energetic that a single burst releases more energy in a millisecond than the sun produces in 3 days. These are fast radio bursts, or FRBs, first identified by astronomer Duncan Lorimer of West Virginia University when reviewing archived pulsar data from the Parkes Observatory in Australia. By 2023, the Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, known as CHIME, had catalogued over 500 distinct FRBs from across the sky. Most occur once and never repeat. A small number repeat on complex, sometimes periodic schedules. In 2020, a repeating FRB was detected originating from within our own Milky Way galaxy, traceable to a magnetar, a type of neutron star with an extraordinarily powerful magnetic field, suggesting that at least some FRBs have a natural source. But the single occurrence bursts, arriving from distances of billions of light years, have defied full explanation. They are voices from across an impossible distance, arriving in a single breath, car. Ying more energy than the mind can comfortably hold, and then gone, as though the universe had simply cleared its throat. Perhaps the most quietly extraordinary puzzle in all of modern physics lies in the earliest moments of the universe's existence. When the Big Bang occurred approximately 13.8 billion years ago, it should, according to the standard model of particle physics, have produced exactly equal amounts of matter and antimatter, which would have collided and annihilated one another entirely, leaving nothing but pure energy. And yet, here we are. Galaxies, stars, planets, oceans, people lying quietly in the dark, listening. Something in those first fractions of a second caused matter to be produced in just slightly greater quantity than antimatter, perhaps one extra particle of matter for every billion particle-antiparticle pairs. Physicist Andrei Sakharov outlined in 1967 the conditions necessary for this asymmetry to occur, and experiments including those at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN and the T2K experiment in Japan have searched for the mechanism. It has not yet been found. We exist because of an asymmetry so small it is almost nothing, a whisper of imbalance at the beginning of time, and we have not yet understood what whispered it. In the constellation Cygnus, approximately 1,400 light-years from Earth, there orbits a star so unusual that it has defied every explanation astronomers have offered for it since its strange behavior was first published in 2015. This is KIC 8,462,852, known informally as Tabby's star after Yale astronomer Tabitha Bayagian, who led the research team that brought it to wide attention. The star dims irregularly and dramatically, sometimes by as much as 22%, in patterns unlike the regular, predictable dips caused by orbiting planets. It also appears to have dimmed by roughly 3% over the course of a century, according to an analysis of archived photographic plates conducted by researcher Bradley Schieffer of Louisiana State University. Proposed explanations have included swarms of comets, a ring of dust, and even the speculative possibility of a megastructure built by an advanced civilization, an idea physicist Freeman Dyson proposed conceptually in 1960. The leading current explanation involves dust and debris from a disrupted planetary body, supported by research published by Bayagian and colleagues in 2018. But the full pattern of Tabby's star's dimming has not been completely matched by any model proposed so far, and it continues to pulse and fade above us, doing whatever it does at its own unhurried and unexplained pace. For several decades, astronomers have had two independent and highly precise methods for measuring how fast the universe is expanding. A number called the Hubble constant, named after astronomer Edwin Hubble, who first demonstrated cosmic expansion in 1929, One method uses the cosmic microwave background, the faint thermal radiation left over from the early universe, measured with extraordinary precision by the Planck satellite, and arrives at a value of approximately 67.4 kilometers per second per megaparsec. The other method uses local observations of standard candles, particularly type Ia supernovae, and a class of pulsating stars called Cepheid variables, and consistently arrives at a higher value of approximately 73 kilometers per second per megaparsec. The two values simply do not agree, and the discrepancy, now called the Hubble tension, has only grown more significant as measurements have become more precise. Cosmologist Adam Rees of Johns Hopkins University, who shared the 2011 Nobel Prize in Physics for the discovery of the universe's accelerating expansion, has stated that the tension may require new physics entirely to resolve. The universe appears to be expanding at two different speeds depending on how you measure it, a quiet impossibility sitting at the heart of modern cosmology. Let your breath slow a little more now. Let your chest be soft. Feel how completely still your body is, resting and warm, carried gently into the quiet of this ancient night. In the data maps produced by the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe, a NASA satellite that mapped the cosmic microwave background with extraordinary precision between 2001 and 2010, astronomers discovered something unexpected and deeply puzzling in the structure of the universe's oldest light. There is a region of the sky, covering roughly 1.8 billion light-years of space, that is significantly colder and emptier than it has any right to be given our current models of cosmic structure formation. This is the cosmic cold spot, first identified by Kate Land and Joe O'May-Gidgeo of Imperial College London in 2004. Surveys conducted by researchers at the University of Hawaii, using the Pan-STARRS telescope, have confirmed the presence of a genuine large-scale underdensity of galaxies in this direction. A supervoid of extraordinary scale, but whether the supervoid fully accounts for the cold spot's temperature, or whether something more exotic is at play, an interaction with another universe in the framework of multiverse theory, for instance, has not been settled. The cold spot rests at the edge of what we can see, faint and ancient, like a held breath in the fabric of the universe itself. Between the known planets and stars of our galaxy, moving through the deep dark of interstellar space without any sun to orbit, there are planets, untethered, unhurried, ancient. These are rogue planets, also called free-floating planetary mass objects, and astronomers have been confirming their existence with increasing frequency in recent years. A 2021 study using data from NASA's Kepler Space Telescope, led by researcher Ian MacDonald of the University of Manchester, and published in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society, identified at least 70 candidate rogue planets in the direction of the galactic bulge. A 2023 survey by NASA's Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope team has suggested there may be billions of such worlds in the Milky Way alone, more rogue planets than stars. Some may be warm enough, heated by geothermal energy from their own cores, to sustain liquid water beneath thick ice shells. They move through the galaxy in silence, carrying their darkness and their warmth in equal measure, belonging to no system, answering to no sun. A reminder that the universe is far stranger and far more quietly alive than our most careful models have yet imagined. There is a quality of time, an arrow, as physicists call it, that points only one way. The past is fixed. The future is open. Memories flow in one direction, entropy increases, and yet the fundamental equations of physics are, for the most part, entirely reversible. They work equally well whether time runs forward or backward. There is nothing in Newton's laws, in Maxwell's equations, in quantum mechanics, that privileges one direction of time over another. The arrow of time, the reason you remember yesterday and not tomorrow, the reason a broken cup does not reassemble itself, the reason the universe began in a state of extraordinarily low entropy that has been increasing ever since, remains one of the deepest and most gently unresolved puzzles in all of theoretical physics. Physicist Roger Penrose of Oxford University has proposed that the arrow of time is connected to the geometry of spacetime itself, to a property he calls the Weyl curvature hypothesis. Others, like physicist Sean Carroll of Caltech, have argued it traces back to the extraordinary improbability of the universe's initial conditions. Time flows in one direction, forward, always forward, the way this night is flowing, the way rest arrives, the way one thought dissolves quietly into the next. Let your eyelids grow heavy and soft. Notice the warmth of your breath as it arrives and departs. Your shoulders are easy, your jaw is loose, and somewhere between this sentence and the next, rest is very close now. At the very edge of what any telescope can see, at a distance of approximately 46 billion light-years in every direction, the boundary created not by the emptiness of space, but by the finite speed of light and the finite age of the universe, there lies a horizon we call the observable universe. Beyond it, space almost certainly continues, perhaps infinitely. And yet we can receive no signal from beyond that boundary, because the light from those regions has not had time to reach us. Astronomer Ethan Siegel, in his work on cosmic horizons, describes this as perhaps the most profound loneliness in all of science, that there is more universe than we can ever, in principle, observe. And within that vast observable sphere, 13.8 billion years of light in every direction, the silence is almost total. The cosmos hums with microwave radiation, flickers with the light of 2 trillion galaxies, vibrates with gravitational waves from ancient collisions. And yet the silence between all of that is wider than imagination can comfortably reach. You are here, warm and still, at the center of your own observable universe, and the quiet around you is, in its own soft way, made of exactly the same ancient stillness as the space between the stars. There is a phenomenon so thoroughly documented in clinical research, so rigorously tested in randomized controlled trials, and yet so poorly understood at a fundamental level that it remains one of the most quietly extraordinary puzzles in all of medicine. The placebo effect, the measurable, repeatable, physiologically real improvement that occurs when a person receives an inert treatment they believe to be real, is far stranger and far more powerful than most people understand. Researcher Ted Kapchuk of Harvard Medical School has spent decades investigating it, and his studies have found that placebos can reduce symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome even when patients are explicitly told they are taking a sugar pill. Neuroscientist Fabrizio Benedetti of the University of Turin has mapped specific neurochemical pathways, including the release of endogenous opioids, dopamine, and serotonin, triggered by placebo administration. The brain, it appears, can generate real biochemical healing responses in response to expectation, context, and trust alone. No one fully understands how the subjective experience of belief translates into measurable molecular change. The mind reaches into the body with an authority that no equation has yet described, patient, warm, real, and far older than any medicine we have made. Among the most remarkable documented phenomena in all of neurological science is a condition called savant syndrome, in which a person with significant cognitive or developmental differences demonstrates an extraordinary, often inexplicable ability in a narrow domain: music, mathematics, art, memory, or spatial calculation, at a level that vastly exceeds even trained experts in that field. Researcher Daryl Treffert of the University of Wisconsin, who spent over 50 years studying savant syndrome, documented cases including Alonzo Clemens, who could sculpt anatomically perfect animals from memory after a single glance, despite severe intellectual disability, and Kim Peek, the inspiration for the film Rain Man, who had memorized the contents of over 12,000 books. Perhaps most remarkable are acquired savants, individuals who develop extraordinary abilities following a brain injury or illness, with no prior training. Neurologist Bruce Miller of the University of California has studied cases where frontotemporal dementia led to the sudden emergence of artistic or musical ability. The brain, somewhere within itself, appears to hold capacities it normally keeps very quietly in reserve, vast, patient, latent abilities that most of us will never find, sleeping beneath the ordinary surface of every waking mind. Perhaps your breath has deepened without you noticing. Let your exhale be long and soft. Let your jaw be completely easy, and let your fingers rest wherever they have settled, warm and still. In hospitals and care homes around the world, medical staff and family members have documented a phenomenon so consistently and so tenderly that it has accumulated its own quiet body of research, and yet it defies every neurological explanation currently available. Terminal lucidity is the name given to the unexpected, often dramatic return of clarity, recognition, and full communication in patients who had been deeply confused, unresponsive, or lost in dementia for months or years, occurring in the final hours or days of their lives. Researcher Michael Naum, a biologist who compiled the first systematic review of the phenomenon in 2009, identified cases stretching back over 200 years in the medical literature, including patients with advanced Alzheimer's disease, meningitis, and brain tumors who suddenly recognized family members, spoke coherently, and expressed love or peace before quietly passing. Neurologist Alexander Bathiany of the Ringier Institute in Vienna has continued this research, surveying caregivers across multiple countries. There is no accepted neurological mechanism for a severely damaged brain to suddenly and briefly restore full function. It simply happens, gently and persistently, at the edge of life, as though something in the mind is gathering itself one last time to say what it has always wanted to say. Every night of your life, including tonight, perhaps beginning already now, even as you listen, your brain enters a series of extraordinarily complex and still incompletely understood states that we call sleep. Researcher Matthew Walker of the University of California, Berkeley, author of the 2017 book Why We Sleep, has described sleep as the most effective biological process we have for consolidating memory, clearing metabolic waste from the brain through the glymphatic system, regulating emotion, and restoring immune function. And yet the precise mechanism by which sleep achieves all of these things, the exact reason why consciousness dims, why the brain then generates vivid internal experiences called dreams, why certain memories are selected for consolidation while others fade, remains genuinely and deeply unresolved. The glymphatic system, discovered by researcher Maken Nedergaard of the University of Rochester in 2012, revealed that cerebrospinal fluid flushes through the brain during sleep, clearing metabolic waste, including proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease. The brain does its quietest and most essential work in the dark, while you rest, cleaning itself, sorting itself, preparing itself, tenderly and without effort, for another day. Let's drift onward together. Since the 1970s, a growing body of careful scientific research conducted at institutions including the University of Virginia School of Medicine, the University of Southampton in England, and the University of Zurich, has investigated the accounts of people who report vivid, coherent experiences of awareness during periods when their hearts were stopped and their brains showed no measurable electrical activity. Cardiologist Pim van Lommel led one of the largest prospective studies, published in The Lancet in 2001, following 344 cardiac arrest patients in the Netherlands, of whom 62 reported a near-death experience. These accounts included verified perceptions of events in the operating room that occurred while the patient was clinically dead, perceptions later corroborated by medical staff. Researcher Sam Parnia of New York University Langone Medical Center has continued this work through the AWARE study, designed to test whether consciousness can exist outside the physical brain during cardiac arrest. No consensus has been reached. The experiences are real to those who have them. The physiology behind them has not been explained. They remain at the edge of what science can currently reach, gentle, persistent, and quietly insistent that the mind may be something larger than we have yet learned to measure. Notice the heaviness of your eyelids now. Let them be completely soft and closed. Your breath is slow and even, rising gently, falling quietly. You are safe. You are still. You are being carried very gently toward rest. At the very center of philosophy of mind, in the place where neuroscience and mathematics and phenomenology converge without resolution, there sits what philosopher David Chalmers first named the hard problem of consciousness in his 1994 paper, and later expanded in his 1996 book, The Conscious Mind. The hard problem is distinct from all the easy problems of consciousness, explaining how the brain processes information, integrates sensory data, controls behavior, reports its own states, because those problems, however difficult technically, are in principle solvable by understanding mechanisms. The hard problem asks why any of that physical processing should be accompanied by inner experience at all. Why does the firing of neurons in a certain pattern produce the felt quality of warmth, or the particular softness of a memory, or the specific texture of a thought drifting just before sleep? Neuroscientist Giulio Tononi of the University of Wisconsin has proposed a mathematical framework called integrated information theory, assigning consciousness a measurable quantity he calls phi. Philosopher Thomas Nagel explored the problem in his famous 1974 essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? The question has not moved toward resolution so much as it has moved toward greater depth, becoming, with each careful inquiry, a little more vast, a little more patient, a little more quietly fundamental than it was before. In the workshops of Cremona, Italy, between approximately 1650 and 1750 CE, a small group of luthiers produced violins, violas, and cellos that have never been equaled in the centuries since their creation. The instruments made by Antonio Stradivari, who crafted approximately 1,100 instruments in his lifetime, of which around 650 survive, produce a sound so distinctive, so warm, and so carrying that professional musicians have paid millions of dollars for a single example, and acoustic researchers have devoted careers to understanding why. Physicist Joseph Najavory of Texas A&M University has proposed that the secret lies in the chemical treatment of the wood. Specifically, that fungal infestation before or during the wood's preparation altered its cellular structure in ways that affect resonance. Dendrochronologist Henry Gracino-Mayer has proposed that the unusually cold period of the Little Ice Age between 1645 and 1715 produced slow-growth alpine spruce with exceptionally dense, uniform wood grain. A 2016 study by a team led by researcher H. Wan-Ching Tai, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, found chemical differences in the mineral composition of Stradivari wood compared to modern instruments. And yet no modern luthier, with all of this research available, has produced an instrument that listeners consistently prefer over the originals. The secret rests inside the wood itself, warm and unhurried and unrepeatable. In the ancient workshops of Egypt, beginning at least as far back as the New Kingdom period around 1500 BCE, craftspeople produced a vivid blue pigment of extraordinary stability and beauty, one of the first synthetic pigments ever made, and one whose formula was so specific in its chemistry that it was essentially lost to the Western world for over 1,000 years after the fall of Rome. Egyptian blue, made by heating together a precise mixture of sand, copper, and the mineral calcite at temperatures between 800 and 900 degrees Celsius, produces calcium copper silicate crystals with a deep, clear blue color that does not fade even after 3,000 years of exposure. Chemist Heinz Burke of the University of Zurich studied the pigment extensively in the early 2000s and documented its rediscovery by European chemists in the early 19th century. More recently, physicist Giovanni Verri of the Art Institute of Chicago discovered that under near-infrared light, Egyptian blue fluoresces brilliantly, meaning it has been hiding in thousands of ancient artworks as an invisible signal, visible only under certain conditions, for millennia, quietly waiting to be seen by someone with the right kind of light. Let your breath be slow and deep. Let your chest rise softly and fall completely. There is nothing needed from you now except this, the simple, ancient act of breathing and being still. Among the treasures of the British Museum in London, there is a small Roman cup, approximately 17 centimeters tall, made of a glass so technically extraordinary that it was not understood by modern materials scientists until the late 20th century. The Lycurgus cup, made in Rome around the 4th century CE, appears jade green in reflected light, but when light is transmitted through it from behind, it glows a deep, translucent red. This optical effect, called dichroism, is caused by the presence of nanoparticles of gold and silver, approximately 70 nanometers in size, embedded within the glass matrix in precisely the right proportions. The discovery of these nanoparticles, made by researchers at the British Museum in 1990, using electron microscopy, revealed that Roman glassmakers had somehow achieved a result that modern nanotechnology only formally developed the tools to understand in the late 20th century. How Roman craftspeople in the 4th century CE deliberately and reproducibly embedded metallic nanoparticles in glass, whether through systematic experimentation, accident, or a lost understanding of materials that we cannot reconstruct, has never been explained. The cup glows red in the light of this question, as quietly extraordinary as it has always been. Woven into the administrative and cultural life of the Inca Empire, that vast, highly organized civilization that stretched across 4,000 kilometers of western South America at its 15th and 16th century height, were a series of knotted cord devices called quipu, or quipu. These objects, made of cotton or camelid fiber, consist of a primary cord from which hang dozens or hundreds of subsidiary cords, each bearing sequences of knots at varying positions, made in varying styles, and dyed in varying colors. Mathematician Gary Urton of Harvard University has spent decades developing a database of quipu and has identified a binary encoding system with over 1,000 distinct information units. A complexity that, he argues, may encode not just the numerical administrative data that Spanish chroniclers described, but also narrative or phonetic content. Researcher Manuel Medrano, working with Urton, published a 2021 paper in Current Anthropology proposing a partial correspondence between a census quipu and a Spanish colonial document, a tentative first step toward decipherment. The Inca had no writing system in the traditional sense, and yet they administered an empire of 12 million people with extraordinary precision. If the quipu encoded language, an entire civilization's voice may still be resting, knotted in silence, waiting for someone to learn how to listen. Across the ancient world, from the workshops of Mesopotamia to the perfume gardens of Persia, from the flower fields of the Nile Delta to the market stalls of ancient Rome, there flourished an art of fragrance so sophisticated and so deeply embedded in religious, medical, and social life that its practitioners were among the most valued craftspeople in any civilization. The oldest known perfumery was excavated at Piagos in Cyprus in 2003 by researcher Maria Rosaria Belgierno and dates back approximately 4,000 years, containing copper stills, mixing bowls and residues of botanical ingredients including lavender, bay, rosemary, pine, and coriander. Ancient Egyptian perfume formulas were recorded in hieroglyphic inscriptions on temple walls, including at the Temple of Edfu, where detailed instructions for sacred Kaifi incense. A complex blend of up to 16 ingredients including wine, raisins, myrrh, and juniper were carved in stone. Organic chemist Robert Bernal has worked with archaeologists to reconstruct ancient scents from molecular residues. Yet the precise sensory experience of these ancient formulations, the particular warmth of a Kaifi blend made with the exact botanical materials available in 1000 BCE, belongs entirely to those who breathed it then, and drifts now only through the imagination, patient and invisible and gone. Perhaps your fingers have grown completely still. Perhaps your breathing is very slow now, arriving and departing so quietly that you can barely feel it. Let that be exactly right. Let rest come closer with each passing breath. Among the most technically accomplished decorative arts of the ancient world was a form of glass mosaic produced in Alexandria and Rome between approximately the 3rd century BCE and the 4th century CE. A technique called millefiori, from the Italian for 1,000 flowers, in which glass rods of multiple colors were fused together, sliced into thin cross-sections, and arranged into bowls, plates, and vessels of extraordinary beauty. The surface of a millefiori object reveals, in each tiny slice, a perfect floral or geometric cross-section of the original composite rod, a pattern that could only have been designed in 3 dimensions before the cutting, requiring a spatial intelligence and technical precision that modern craftspeople find deeply impressive, even with the benefit of understanding the process. Researcher Veronica Tatton-Brown of the British Museum has documented the finest surviving examples. What makes ancient Millefiori particularly remarkable is the quality of the glass itself, a clarity, a color depth, and a consistency of refractive properties that modern analyses have not been able to fully account for given the materials and tools available at the time. The ancient glassmakers of Alexandria made objects so beautiful, and with a precision so quiet and so complete, that we are still studying their methods 2,000 years later and still learning. Beneath a low hill in the Hebei province of China, sealed beneath the earth since approximately 210 BCE, there lies a tomb of such extraordinary scale and such deliberate concealment that in over 2,000 years, no archaeologist has entered its inner chamber. This is the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China, a complex covering approximately 56 square kilometers, whose outer perimeter alone is larger than the city of Paris. The famous terracotta army, discovered accidentally in 1974 by farmers digging a well near Xi'an, numbers over 8,000 individual figures arranged in battle formation in 4 separate pits. And these warriors are merely the outer guard of a monument whose center has never been opened. Ancient historian Sima Qian, writing around 100 BCE, described the interior chamber as containing a scale model of the entire Chinese empire, with rivers of flowing mercury representing the Yangtze and Yellow rivers. Modern soil surveys conducted by researchers including Duan Qingbo of Shanxi province have detected unusually high concentrations of mercury beneath the burial mound, lending extraordinary credibility to the ancient description. The chamber rests sealed and patient beneath the Chinese earth, holding whatever it holds, entirely undisturbed for over 2 millennia. In the village of Amphipolis in northern Greece, inside a large burial mound called Casta Hill, archaeologists led by Katerina Peristori of the Greek Central Archaeological Council began excavating in 2012 what would become one of the most significant and widely discussed tomb discoveries in decades. The mound, ringed by a marble perimeter wall nearly 500 meters long, the largest ever found in Greece, contained a sphinx-guarded entrance, a mosaic floor depicting the abduction of Persephone, and a series of antechambers of extraordinary refinement. The tomb dates to the late 4th century BCE, placing it in the era of Alexander the Great, and its scale and craftsmanship immediately fueled speculation about the identity of its occupant. Skeletal remains found in the innermost chamber belong to multiple individuals, including a woman of high status estimated to be over 60 years old, a mature man, 2 men in their 30s, and cremated remains of a 5th person. Despite years of analysis and debate among Greek archaeologists, no definitive identification has been made. The tomb waits, opened but unanswered in the Greek landscape, full of beauty and full of quiet. Let your breath be long and slow. Let the weight of your body settle a little more deeply into wherever you are resting. Your chest rises gently. Your fingers are warm and still. You are held entirely in this soft and patient night. Among the thousands of ancient texts discovered between 1947 and 1956, in a series of caves near Qumran on the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea, one scroll stands apart from all the others in the peculiar nature of its mystery. The copper scroll, found in Cave 3 at Qumran in 1952 and now housed at the Jordan Museum in Amman, is inscribed not on parchment or papyrus like the other Dead Sea Scrolls, but on a thin sheet of copper, pressed with a text describing 64 locations across the landscape of ancient Judea, where enormous quantities of gold, silver, sacred vessels, and scrolls were said to have been Aiden. Researcher John Allegro led the team that first deciphered and published the scroll in 1960, and his translation described a combined treasure of an estimated 138 tons of gold and silver, an amount so vast that many scholars initially dismissed it as fictional. Jordanian scholar Judah K. Lefkowitz argued in his 2000 study that the figures may use units different from those assumed by earlier translators, making the actual amounts more plausible. No item listed in the copper scroll has ever been found. The treasure, if it exists, rests somewhere beneath the landscape of the ancient Levant, patient and sealed in its own undisturbed dark. On the island of Shugborough Hall in Staffordshire, England, carved in shallow relief on the base of a monument known as the Shepherd's Monument in the garden of Shugborough Estate, constructed in the 1760s, there is a sequence of 10 letters that has never been satisfactorily explained. OUOSV, flanked on either side by the letters D and M. The inscription was carved beneath a reversed version of Nicolas Poussin's painting Et in Arcadia Ego, a painting itself associated with enduring speculations about hidden knowledge and ancient secrets. Over the centuries, cryptographers, historians, and enthusiasts have proposed that the inscription encodes a message relating to the Holy Grail, to Freemasonry, to a hidden treasure, or to a private family sentiment. Researcher Richard Kemp has cataloged dozens of proposed decipherments, none of which has achieved consensus. Wartime codebreaker Charles Dickens and later Josiah Wedgwood both reportedly attempted to decode it, without success. The letters sit in a quiet English garden, carved in stone, exposed to 2.5 centuries of weather, utterly legible and utterly silent, holding whatever meaning was placed in them with the patience of a secret that has simply learned to wait. Notice the softness of your eyelids now. Notice how your jaw has released. Perhaps your breathing has found its own slow and ancient rhythm, arriving and departing without any effort at all. Let that rhythm carry you further, very gently, toward rest. In the year 1885, 3 sealed iron boxes were deposited with a Virginia innkeeper named Robert Morris by a well-dressed stranger named Thomas Jefferson Beale, who left and was never seen again. When Morris eventually opened the boxes, he found 3 ciphered documents and a plain letter explaining that they contained the location of a buried treasure, an enormous cache of gold, silver, and jewels worth several $million in modern terms, collected during a mining expedition in the American Southwest and buried somewhere in Bedford County, Virginia. The second cipher, when decoded using the Declaration of Independence as a key, described the contents of the treasure in detail. The first and third ciphers, describing the exact location of the burial and the names of the treasure's rightful heirs, have never been decoded. The Beale ciphers were published as a pamphlet in 1885 by researcher James Ward and have attracted the sustained attention of amateur and professional cryptographers ever since. Analyst Carl Hammer of Sperry Univac studied them with early computers in the 1970s without resolution. Whether the treasure exists, whether Beale was a real person, and whether the unsolved ciphers contain genuine information or an elaborate confabulation, remain questions that have never been peacefully closed. In the early hours of December 1st, 1948, a man was found dead on Somerton Beach near Adelaide, Australia, well dressed, with no identification, no wallet, and no cause of death that any pathologist could determine. In a hidden pocket sewn inside his trousers, investigators later found a tiny rolled piece of paper bearing two words in Persian, Tamam Shud, meaning it is ended or it is finished, torn from the final page of a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The torn book was eventually found, and on its back cover were a series of letters in an unknown code and a phone number leading to a woman who denied knowing the man but whose reaction, according to investigators present, suggested otherwise. Researcher Derek Abbott of the University of Adelaide spent years investigating the case, even using DNA analysis of the man's exhumed remains. But the Somerton man's identity and cause of death have never been confirmed. In 2022, Australian investigators finally made a tentative identification, a man named Carl Webb, though not all researchers agree the case is closed. He rests in a grave in West Terrace Cemetery in Adelaide, beneath a headstone that for decades read only, "Here lies the unknown man." Every night, without exception, every human being who has ever lived has entered a state in which the conscious, waking mind grows quiet and the inner world becomes vivid, strange, and real in its own particular way. You dream and despair. Centuries of philosophical inquiry and decades of modern neuroscientific research. The reason why you dream, the precise function that dreaming serves, the mechanism by which the sleeping brain generates coherent narrative experience, the question of what the content of dreams means, if anything at all, has never been fully resolved. Researcher Rosalind Cartwright of Rush University, who studied dreams for over 50 years, found evidence that dreaming plays a significant role in emotional regulation, that the sleeping brain replays emotionally charged memories and gradually integrates them into existing understanding, softening their charge over time. Neuroscientist Robert Stickgold of Harvard Medical School has documented the role of REM sleep in memory consolidation and creative problem solving. And yet, why the brain generates the particular imagery it does, why a specific face appears, why a specific landscape unfolds, remains as quiet and as unresolved as the dream itself, dissolving at the edge of waking the way mist dissolves in morning warmth, leaving only a faint impression that something important passed through. There is a question so fundamental that it is rarely asked directly, because the asking of it tends to open outward in every direction at once until it encompasses everything. Where did language come from? Not any particular language, not Latin or Sumerian or Sanskrit, but language itself. The capacity for symbolic, recursive, infinitely generative communication that separates the human mind from every other mind on this planet. Linguist Noam Chomsky of MIT proposed in the 1950s and 1960s that human beings possess an innate universal grammar, a deep biological structure that makes language acquisition not just possible, but inevitable in any normal human child. Evolutionary biologist W. Tecumseh Fitch of the University of Vienna has studied the vocal anatomy and cognitive prerequisites for language across species. Researcher Daniel Everett spent decades living among the Paraha people of the Brazilian Amazon and proposed, controversially, that their language, which appears to lack recursion, challenges Chomsky's universal grammar entirely. The origin of language has been called, by the Linguistic Society of Paris in 1866, a question so unanswerable that they banned papers on the subject from their journal. The ban was lifted, but the answer has not arrived. We speak because we are human. And why we are human in this way remains a quiet, timeless wonder. Let your eyelids rest completely now. Let your breath arrive without any effort at all. Feel the warmth of wherever you are, your shoulders, your chest, the soft weight of your hands. Everything is still. Everything is safe. You are held entirely in this ancient and patient night. There are places in the world where light behaves in ways that physics has not yet fully explained, where orbs drift above marshlands without any known source, where a particular valley in Norway glows on winter evenings, where ball lightning, a slowly moving, luminous sphere of light that has been reported by credible observers for centuries across every continent and culture, appears briefly and then vanishes, leaving behind sometimes a faint smell of ozone, sometimes nothing at all. Ball lightning has been photographed and in rare cases captured on video. Physicist Peter Handel of the University of Missouri sent. Louis proposed a quantum mechanical explanation in 1975. Others have suggested microwave radiation, plasma vortices, or excited nitrogen molecules. A 2014 paper by researchers Jianyang Sen, Ping Yuan, and Xumei Zhu from the Northwest Normal University in China described what they believed to be a genuine observation of ball lightning near Qinghai, China, recorded by spectrographs. The spectrum showed silicon, iron, and calcium, consistent with soil elements that might be vaporized by a lightning strike and briefly sustained in a glowing sphere. The mystery may be approaching an answer. And yet for now it drifts soft, luminous, patient, in the long list of things the Earth does quietly, without explanation, without apology. In the spring of 1887, in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England, according to a story preserved in two independent 12th century accounts, one by chronicler William of Newburgh and another by Ralph of Coggeshall, two children emerged from a pit near the village speaking an unknown language, wearing unfamiliar clothing, and with one remarkable quality shared between them. Their skin was green. They were taken in by a local landowner named Richard de Calney. The girls survived and eventually learned English. The boy did not. The girl described coming from a land called St. Martin's Land, where the sun never fully rose and everything was bathed in a perpetual twilight. Over the months she lived in the village, her green color faded as she adjusted to a new diet. No satisfying explanation has ever been prod. Used. Researcher Paul Harris proposed in 1998 in the Fortean Studies Journal that the children may have suffered from hypochromic anemia caused by a diet deficient in iron, which can produce a greenish tint to the skin, and that they may have been Flemish immigrant children who had become lost and disoriented. Others have proposed they were from a subterranean community or from a wooded region so shaded that their diet was severely restricted. The green children of Woolpit remain, quietly and gently, one of medieval history's most softly inexplicable stories. In January 1959, a group of 9 experienced ski hikers led by Igor Dyatlov set out into the Ural Mountains of what was then the Soviet Union, heading toward a peak called Otort. They never arrived. When rescuers found their camp on the slope of Kalatsiakal, a name meaning, in the Mansi language, dead mountain, the tent had been cut open from the inside, and the hikers had fled into the sub-zero night without adequate clothing or equipment. Their bodies were found scattered across the slope over the following weeks. Some had suffered severe internal injuries, fractured ribs, a crushed skull, with no external wounds to account for them. One was missing her tongue. Soviet investigators closed the case with the conclusion that the group had died due to a compelling natural force, a phrase so careful and so open as to be almost no explanation at all. Researcher Donnie Eichar examined the case in his 2013 book Dead Mountain and proposed infrasound generated by wind patterns over the mountain as a contributing cause of panic. A 2021 investigation by Russian prosecutors cited an avalanche. Neither explanation has satisfied all the evidence. The mountain still stands in the Ural night, cold and quiet, carrying whatever it knows in a silence that is complete. In the early morning of December 4th, 1872, the brigantine Mary Celeste was discovered drifting in the Atlantic Ocean 600 miles off the coast of Portugal, perfectly seaworthy, with cargo intact, food prepared, and personal belongings untouched, but entirely without a crew. The ship's lifeboat was missing. The last entry in the log was dated November 24th, 10 days earlier. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and 7 crew members had simply vanished. The ship was found by the Dei Gratia, whose captain, David Morehouse, knew Briggs personally. A subsequent inquiry in Gibraltar raised but did not confirm suspicions of foul play, fraud, or collision with the Dei Gratia herself. Researcher Brian Hicks, in his 2004 book Ghost Ship, examined every available document and concluded that a combination of alcohol fumes from the cargo of industrial alcohol, a malfunctioning pump, and a sudden panic that led Briggs to order an evacuation, one from which the lifeboat then became separated, remains the most plausible explanation. But the Mary Celeste has sailed for a century and a half through the imagination of everyone who hears its story. A ghost ship carrying its mystery, the way the ocean carries the wind entirely and without end. And here, in the closing hours of this long and ancient night, the mysteries grow quieter. They ask less of the mind and offer more to the heart. Perhaps time itself is the deepest mystery of all, not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a gift to be inhabited. Physicist Carlo Rovelli, in his 2017 book The Order of Time, described time as something that flows differently depending on where you are, something that is shaped by mass and velocity and gravity, something that the equations of physics suggest may not, at the deepest level, exist as a fundamental feature of the universe at all. And yet here you are, warm and still, moving through it or being moved by it, or perhaps simply resting within it, the way a stone rests in a river, unhurried, patient, shaped by something it cannot see and need not name. The universe holds 100 mysteries, and you have drifted alongside each of them tonight. And not one of them required an answer to be beautiful. Not one of them needed to be solved to fill you with the quiet wonder that has been settling in you, like warmth, like weight, like the ancient and unhurried peace that has always been waiting beneath the surface of everything. Rest now, dear wanderer. The questions will be here tomorrow, exactly as they were today, patient, soft, unhurried, asking nothing of you in the dark. You have traveled far tonight, through buried tombs and starlit deserts, through ocean floors and ancient forests, through the corridors of the mind itself and the vast, quiet architecture of the cosmos. And through all of it, you have simply been here breathing, drifting, resting. That is more than enough. That is perhaps everything. Good night, Sage. Good night, Selim. Good night, Vesper and Orion and Lyrian and Frost. Good night, dear listener, wherever you are resting, whoever you are, whatever question. Live quietly inside you. You are safe. You are held. You are exactly where you are meant to be in this soft and ancient dark. If you are still with me, the next journey is already waiting.